Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new fight week. It's UFC 321 pay-per-view fight week. Contender Series is over. Now it's time for the big show. UFC 321, it's a heavyweight title fight, undisputed. Tom Aspinall is going to be defending his heavyweight crown against none other than France's own Ciryl Gane. He's looking to make good on that title fight. He's had a couple opportunities. He finally gets a big chance. And guys, it's going down with a big slate. It's in Abu Dhabi. It's going to be an early card. We got a lot of great stuff to discuss. And we've got none other than the great Wizz MMA back in the building to break it all down with us. How are you, my man?
I'm very angry about last week. It was two bets. The under 2.5 in the Barlow fight, it had its chances. I'll take that one on the chin. Both guys were flopping around in round 1 and round 2. So tough L, but happens. But the one I will refuse to accept, is the Nelson Frivola fight. How? What are we doing here? That was probably the worst officiated card I have ever watched in my life. Multiple times, multiple fights that have just had errors, officiating errors. We don't really see this. And not stopping the fight when there's 3 seconds left and saying that you continue the fight because you didn't wave your hands over your head. Like, what kind of rule is that? So all of that just didn't make sense to me, and I'm ready to make it back.
Absolutely. We're coming for revenge. It reminded me a lot of UFC Atlantic City from back in the day. Shout out to Gary Copeland. Just awful refereeing all around. And, I think it's par for the course in the UFC these days. Like the refereeing, the officiating, the judging, it's all pretty shit, right? But when you just look at, some weeks are worse than others. And last week was a disaster class. I was on a shitload of underdogs, my man. Thankfully, a bunch of them came through. Yeah. But just look at what happened to my guy, Kyle Prepelec, right? At the time of the stoppage loss, he's minus 800. We bet him at plus 350. It was a disaster, right? Like you look at Kyle and how he got treated there. It's not fair, but as my guy Cam in the chat says, I love you, DeJordan Santos. Shout out to DeJordan Santos. We told you guys, this man, DeJordan Santos, coming out here to fight hard. So I was fired up about that, man. When you talk about a guy that's willing to push hard and fight for your dollar, we've got one, ladies and gentlemen. DeJordan Santos, whether it's Will Curry, Danny Barlow, or anybody else, if you want to fight hard for 15, he's going to come bring you that smoke. But with that being said, my man, let's do it. Let's keep the momentum going. Oh, please, go ahead.
All I want to say is thank you, Mr. Bruno Silva. It wasn't a tracked play. I sung it from the heavens here on the show. But that made me even on the night. So it's negative 3.40. But I'm happy with Bruno Silva. That was a perfect read. We called it on the show. He just kept crashing the pocket. The dude's hand goes down, and he's bopping him on the feet, like without going too technical into it. So, all right, no more time on last card.
All right, no, we're gonna spend just one more second on last card because
pull up
the Bet MMA. We did all right last week, guys. Bruno Silva put the money in the bag with the finish. By the way, DeJordan Santos, he needed to earn that one, no doubt about it. But he was a plus 250, came through. Ravenna Oliveira, you're dead to me. Just not doing enough out there. That will be the last time she sees my dollars. Kyle Prepelec, I hope they give you another one, brother. Rest up them balls. Sorry about that. Jasmine. She died, right? You either live to be a hero or you die sometimes in pursuit of that gold. That's what happened to Jasmine. Shout out to her. Nothing wrong with that one. It literally just, again, if they fight 10 times, I'm not sure she's getting knocked out brutally in the first round, 10 times out of 10. But we'll take it how it goes. And ultimately, guys, how about that Arichi Lang call, by the way? We talked about Arichi Lang, ITD. And Arichi Lang smoked him with just one punch there. The first guy to ever knock out Cody Gibson, by the way. And Cody Gibson afterwards was like, I'm eating a cheesesteak. I've never been knocked out before, so it is what it is. I was like, fair play to Cody Gibson, good attitude about it. But now we got a whole new slate of fight card to break down. Let's start with the first one, my man, where we got Jacqueline Amarim taking on Mizuki Inoue. And a lot of you guys that are, new around here might be saying, who the hell is Mizuki Inoue? Has not fought, certainly very frequently in the UFC, has not fought very recently in the UFC either. And I went back to watch Wiz her fight with Hannah Goldie today. Did not come away like super impressed with that fight, right? Like she got taken down in that fight. She had some contentious exchanges in that fight with Hannah Goldie. Hannah's a little bit physical, but I just don't really rate her out as a grappler, right? Certainly not at a very high level at the UFC level. And when you look at Inoue, she's got a nice record to the submission prop. I think it's 9-0 over the course of her career. She's got the fight against Virna Jandiroba where she went 5 rounds back in 2018. But if you watch that fight as well, she spends the vast majority of the fight in the bottom position. Like she's constantly being taken down in that fight. She has very little answers off of her back. The one thing I will give her is she did a decent job entering legs, regarding, doing a couple things to show she's clearly competent on the ground, right? She's not bad on the ground. But the other thing about Virna is that Virna is like a pure grappler, right? Like looking to grapple, looking to get on top, looking to pass the guard, methodically apply submissions. And I did see that at a certain point in that fight, Virna was like, yo, I could literally just do whatever I want. It just like popped up, started throwing ground and pound elbows, past the guard, looked for the back a few times. And, again, this is all the way back in 2018, right? Inoue is 31, so she's not ancient. She's just not very active. And so I have real question marks about where she's at in her career. How seriously is she taking this? Does she want to be out here? Is she just doing it to do it? Amareem's been staying active. She's been very aggressive over the course of her UFC career. I would say she's offered a better, product each and every time out. And so if I look at Amareem and I say to myself, okay, she had one fight in the UFC where she gassed in kind of embarrassing fashion. It was against Sam Hughes. Sam Hughes cheated there. It was a big pay-per-view card. And she went out there and went for the kill early and kind of ran out of steam, right? And I think that we saw against Conejo, if she goes out there and gets to the top position and looks to beat somebody up, she could do that for 15 full minutes, right? The problem was, she went out there and tried to get the submission, used all of her squeeze, and got frustrated and desperate because her opponent was cheating. And so, she thought there were rules in MMA. Then by the time that she's fighting Vanessa Demopoulos, she realized, hey, let me grab the glove. Let me just cheat myself. There are no rules in MMA. So I think that, again, we learned it again on Saturday. How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? There are no rules in MMA. I think that Amareem's going to get on top, and for that reason, I think she's going to win the fight. I think Inoue, not a bad fighter. I just think she's going to spend way too much time on the bottom position here. And if I was looking for a way to play this fight, unfortunately, guys, long since the days of Amareem KO at 16-1, like we got against Conejo, that was a gift from the heavens, right? I just think Amareem by KO is once again live here because I don't think it's going to be easy to submit Inoue, right? Like if Virna Jandiroba, a very skilled grappler, is not submitting you, you clearly have good submission defense. And I do think that she's probably going to be committed to trying to defend the subs here. But you got 5-1, 6-1, whatever it is on the KO for the Amareem side. And it's like, if I expect you to be in the top position for 15 minutes, you're going to have opportunities to TKO somebody, right? Even if they just get stuck in a crucifix for 30 seconds and they call the fight off. So for me, Amareem is the pick. And that's the way I see it going down, man. I think Amareem is somebody I've been watching as like a potential title challenger to emerge in this division. And I know that sounds bullish, but it's just like, since the Sam Hughes fight, what has she done? Produced a lot of violent finishes, gone out there, dominated women, gotten to dominant positions, done it as an underdog at times as well. So now she's a big favorite. Do I want to chase that money line price? Not necessarily. I just think she probably wins the fight. What do you think?
Yeah, we've seen Amareem, in the debut against Sam Hughes, didn't really look all that good. Sam Hughes, though, is the ultimate test or the ultimate measuring stick for any lady in the division. She goes out there, she can eat every single shot that you're throwing out there, and she'll still be there. She has unlimited cardio, and she will strike for ages and has good volume. She is a punching bag, but Amareem doesn't really strike all that well. She doesn't really have the greatest technique, but neither does Inoue. So on the feet, I think this is very much 50-50. But I just don't think this fight stays on the feet for too long. I do understand that Inoue's submission record is very prestigious. I believe it's 8-0. But I just don't believe in her conditioning, because she's just been not fighting at all. 2 fights in 5 years is just nothing. So you got to question where her motivation is really at. That's one. But that's already like baked into the line. Now, Amarim is just a girl who will shoot double legs, and you don't really see that in female MMA that much. And if you're getting taken down by Hannah Goldie just off pure strength, I mean, Amarim isn't the greatest wrestler, but if she's able to get in deep on a double leg, I would like to say 8 times out of 10 she lands it if Hannah Goldie is just muscling her down to the floor. When it gets down to the mat, I think it's just Amarim all day. Whether she gets the sub or not, I think she's able to either control position for 3 rounds or get the submission. So -3.5 Amarim is good. Amarim in parlays is fine, but the line is too heavy now, so I'd probably stay away from that. But yeah, 4-inch reach advantage as well. And the girl that's at American Top Team, arguably the best gym in MMA right now, yeah, you got to go with Amarim. Is that a surprise looking at the line? No. That's why the line is where it is.
Fair play. I don't know, man. It might be team fight ready after last week. The 2-0 underdog sweep. They've certainly reemerged as somebody to watch. But no, I'm just playing with you, bro. ATD.
I will.
The class.
I will say one thing, and basically out of Fight Ready, you kind of reminded me of this. Shout out to Coach Santino, who is retiring, main coach out of Fight Ready. He's now retiring. He's done everything in the sport, from fighting to coaching for a long time, a very high level. And we all know Fight Ready. We all know the guys and girls that come out of that gym. They're really high level. So shout out to him, and congratulations on a great career.
Absolutely. Great note there. And also, obviously probably not an opportune time. There's never an opportune time, but it just brought it back to my mind. Rest in peace to Duke Rufus, icon of the sport, gone too soon. So, like I said, there's no natural way to say it, but we were talking about coaching staffs, and, I just didn't want to let that moment pass without saying something. Obviously it's still fresh on the mind. So, I saw Anthony Pettis, a few of the guys, Paul Felder as well on the broadcast last week. Powerful testimony there. And I know what good coaches have done in my life. So shout out to Duke Rufus and all the people that give their time. But with that being said, my man, we can move along to this next fight on the card. We got Azat Maxim taking on Mitch Raposo. And why don't you start us off with this one, Wiz?
Yeah, and guys, I'm going to be very honest. More than a couple of these fights on the card are going to be a quick breakdown for me, because, I mean, the lines are so heavy, and I just agree with the favorite being a favorite. And no different here. Mitch Raposo is a guy that just really knows how to cage push and then go in for takedowns, but that is just not going to work against Azat Maxim. Azat Maxim, yes, he's on a 2-fight losing streak, which you can kind of take that as motivation is at an all-time high. He's almost fighting for his job here. I don't think he is, even if he loses. Don't see him losing. This guy took Tagir Olumbekov. I think that should have been a split. I think he maybe should have won that fight. But he took everything from Tagir. He defended so many takedowns, and his striking is really crisp. And the one thing that I really like about Azat is that his 1-2, his straight shots, they're powerful. And you can clearly see every time he lands them, guys are affected. They don't take them well, and they kind of shy away. They don't throw volume for a couple seconds. So this guy throws out volume. He's pressuring, and against a guy like Mitch Raposo, who his game is pressuring you against the cage and trying to get you down, I think he's just getting the matchup he wants here. So for me, give me Azat Maxim. I do think he gets Mitch out of there, but Mitch is a weasel. He can get fights to decision a lot, and I think maybe he can last just durability-wise. I really think Azat should finish this guy, though.
Yeah, I would say that for me, there's just a huge difference in physicality. SD Crusader in the chat says, judges love Mitch, bet the split. And I get where you're coming from there. I don't know if in this part of the world, he's going to get the same kind of favorable treatment. We'll have to wait and see on that. We'll report back. But you look and see there's a massive reach advantage for Azat Maxim here. You look at the measurables, right? UFC stats. I'd say most of the stat categories point towards Azat Maxim. He's not the most accurate guy. You can pick and choose and make, hey, there's some mistakes here. But when you just look at his broad body of work, he's fought very tough guys in the UFC, and things haven't quite worked out yet. But you see that the skills are clearly there. And even fighting, high-level competition, he's sporting an 85% takedown defense rate compared to just 50% for Mitch Raposo. He's got 2.3 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's the only one of these guys that's ever recorded a submission attempt in the UFC. So I feel like it's easier to take down Mitch Raposo. Maxim's a little bit more physical. He's the longer, bigger guy on the feet. I'd say he's a little bit more heavy-handed. So, Mitch Raposo, I just don't know what his one UFC skill set is. If you were to say, all right, Mitch needs to go out there, and is he going to go win a jiu-jitsu tournament with this? Is he going to go, kickbox? Is he going to do professional boxing on the side? I just don't really see it. So, happy to come back and say, hey, I was wrong. Mitch Raposo better than I thought he was. But Maxim, more experienced, bigger guy, more physical, more dangerous. I think he wins the fight. And I think he's alive to finish this one as well. Again, you see some of the guys that haven't finished Mitch, and you're like, man, minor miracles, right? But I think the Bill's coming due this week. All right, man. Next up, we've got what I could only describe to you as a fight. One of the fights of all time. We got Chris Huggy Bear, Beast Boy, whatever you want to call him, Barnett, taking on Hamdi Abdelwahab. And, listen, this is a simple fight for me to handicap, Wiz, in the sense of, who do I think is going to win? Fuck if I know. I think this is kind of a crapshoot of a fight. Who do I think should be a favorite? I think Hamdi should be a favorite, even though it should be a slight favorite. Just because Hamdi is a bigger guy, he's a much more natural athlete, with all due respect to Barnett. He's a lot closer to his physical prime. Chris Barnett, I basically decided, man, it's going to be really hard for me to ever put another dollar on this guy. Seeing him go out there and just get injured from, the course of natural movement. Because, again, we don't want to be disrespectful. We don't want to be rude for the sake of being rude. The guy's overweight, right? And so you see the fact that he's so overweight that he injured himself during a fight with virtually no contact with his opponent, right? It was just the nature of being so big and moving around at a vigorous pace, hard and fast on short notice. He hurt himself, right? And I do worry that Chris Barnett's lack of athleticism compared to Hamdi will, and again, he does have his own brand of athleticism, right? But I just mean his physical presence, right? He's not the most, formidable guy. He's a guy that has very dynamic offense. He could spin. He could be, a guy that moves and does some speedy things, but he's just a very difficult guy to describe, right? There's in many ways, he does not look like an athlete at all, but then he does things that look very athletic at times, and you have to give him that credit and respect. So ultimately, man, I break down a fight like this and I say at 39 years of age, when you're coming off of a major knee surgery, when you had these problems and these injuries, and, you've got these horrible, looks out there in the UFC where Jake Collier is doing whatever he wants to you until he has cardiac arrest. And, these are just things that for me make me say, I don't know if I want to be in the Barnett business, but at plus 3XX, when you've got, a guy in Hamdi who's not very good, right? And still clearly a work in progress. And he's had 5 pro MMA fights. That's the kind of guy that could definitely slip on a banana peel. But the difference between Hamdi and John Vellante is John Vellante didn't train mixed martial arts for 3 years, showed up fat as a house, and won most of the minutes until he got spin kicked in the head there, right? So that's not a bullish sign either. I feel like Hamdi's probably going to win this one. I feel like he probably gets takedowns here quite easily if he goes for them. But would I put it past Hamdi to gas out and lose this fight in embarrassing fashion, or frankly to just get spin kicked in the head? No. So for me, it's a dog or pass situation, but I lean towards a pass here, unfortunately. If Beast Boy was a little bit younger, a little bit fresher, and didn't have that recent knee injury, I'd probably feel better about giving him a chance here. But it seems like a lot's working against him here, and especially flying overseas. He's fought everywhere, but I don't think they, system's going to be well disposed towards him over there. What do you think, man?
Again, another heavy favorite. Liam, I'm upset. You're going up against New York? How dare you?
No quit in New York.
Let's just put it this way. We have someone who is, I believe, I could be mistaken here, but from what I heard, Barnett was on like a weight loss show before his UFC career, and commendable. Lost a ton of weight, made it to the UFC. That's also commendable. The one thing outside of skill that's very worrying is the guy was active. Like 3 years ago, he was very active. Like he was fighting 3 times a year, and then he fights. He goes on like a 2.5 year layoff, fights once, and then it's been a year again since he's fought. I believe that's due to injury because during the walkouts, I remember this very clearly. I saw that dude get injured, and he did not look happy about it when he was like running around in the cage. And I just slammed Kennedy and Zechuku round one, round two, and I was very happy. But in this fight, I just don't see a way where Hamdi doesn't land takedowns at will. I don't think he's the greatest fighter at all. I think he's one of the worst, and with all due respect. But it's just the size difference, 5 inches of height, and then paired with Chris Barnett's lack of technical ability. Unfortunately, it's just a Hamdi, and I think the only way you can really bet on this fight is two ways: is either the under 2.5 rounds, or you bet Hamdi round one KO at +2. Actually, no, +320 is what I got. I got a very bad line because California. I'm sure you guys can get better.
There you have it. Yeah, man. I looked back and Barnett hurt himself, re-injured his Achilles that was already injured before the fight even started with Kennedy while he was warming up. And again, it's like when you're looking for somebody, durability is one of the biggest things that I'm looking for, ideally, in a fighter. And you can't always get that at a big underdog price tag, but I'd like him to be either young or durable, or it's like, you know, you got to check one box for me, or bigger, or it's like he's just more experienced. That's it. He's more experienced, a little bit more dynamic as a striker, particularly as a kicker. But as a puncher, I think that leaves a little bit to be desired, right? So interesting fight, pretty low level, and we wish them both the best.
Yeah,
Good luck and have fun.
and Hamdi, it does have some power to his credit. Like he's dropped his last 3 opponents, and those guys don't really get dropped. So I will give him props there. And that's why I'm looking at the knockout angle. I think he will hurt Barnett at some point, and I'm hoping it's round one because Barnett's not the most durable guy.
Let's find out. Speaking of people getting hurt, Jose Delgado, Nathaniel Wood. This seems like a banger fight in the featherweight division. Obviously, Delgado is the one who's, you know, kind of that fresh face looking to make his way onto the UFC fans' radar. And Nathaniel Wood, a known quantity, a guy that a lot of people have, you know, respect and admiration for, fought at 135, fought at 145, you know, been doing the damn thing, 32 years of age now. Believe he's fighting out his UFC contract in this fight. So a lot to play for Nathaniel Wood here. He's given up size clearly in terms of both height as well as reach in this matchup, but he does have a lot more UFC experience to fall back on. Wiz, we'll kick this one over to you first, my man. How do you feel about this matchup? How do you see it going down?
All right, so we're breaking down the first fight of the night that's competitive. I am very excited for this fight for multiple reasons. I think Jose Delgado is a young prospect in the division that carries a ton of power. It's very dangerous, and we just haven't seen a guy like him at 145 in some time. So that's the archetype of fighter that I like. Someone who's dangerous, someone who's fast, a little bit longer. You know, the measurables are harder to get at this level or at this weight class. And then Nathaniel Wood, technically solid everywhere. And you can't really question his fight IQ. The issue with Nathaniel Wood is that he gets cracked. When he throws, he leaves a second before he returns those hands to the face. Guys tend to crash in on him. And if they land clean, they got power, they will hurt him. But the guy has snuck away from a couple of really bad positions. One of them I'll name is against Naimov. That fight was man, I honestly thought he was going to get finished when he got dropped there. I almost thought he was going to get submitted to. And Naimov is a smaller guy in the division. Let alone you're going up against a dude who's 5 inches taller.
Did we lose brother Wiz? Wiz, did you get eaten by the computer monster? I'm gonna wait here for about 2 more seconds, and then we'll bounce Wiz and bring him right back in as soon as he's coming through. All right, guys, we're gonna wait, and Wiz should be back here shortly, but I'll take over in his place here for a second. And here's what we got, guys. You look at Delgado. You look at what he's brought to the table. He's a long guy. He's got big knees up the middle. He does a pretty good job with his long man tools. He could jab. He could throw that 1-2. He can kind of mix it up a little bit where his distance is. He comes forward. He stays aggressive. Got some submissions on his record as well. And you also see that, he's a guy that knows how to use that frame, that long man leverage. We got our guy Wiz back in the building. I kept it warm for you, my brother. The mic is hot. It's on you.
My apologies. I just have to go pay my internet bill. Where did I cut out?
Bro. You were talking about Delgado, I think. That's where I took over.
Okay, so what I was mentioning, I think I'll just have to repeat it. Nathaniel Wood, really high IQ fighter, really technical, and I do like his skill. Pretty well-rounded everywhere, but where he lacks is the physicality and durability. He tends to get dropped in his fights, he gets hurt, and somehow finds a way to sneak away. I just don't think that is going to be as easy to do in this fight against someone who is as sharp as Delgado, who has the reach and height advantages that are going to create an even longer reach just in terms of depth perception when you're striking. I talk about it a lot. When you're striking and the guy has both a reach and height advantage of significance against you, it creates an illusion of punching at even farther distance. So you find yourself overreaching. The guys who are not the most technical strikers will overreach and find themselves in trouble. I don't think Nathaniel Wood's going to be doing that in this fight, but I think he's going to be really gun shy just due to the range. Being gun shy against this guy, Jose Delgado, will give him the confidence to march forward and apply pressure. And if Nathaniel Wood isn't smart with the way he approaches this fight, I think he has the opportunity of getting knocked out here. I do like the under 2.5 in this fight. I've been trying to get one on Nathaniel Wood for the under 2.5 for some time, and I think this could be the spot. I haven't really made my decision yet, but my prediction for the win here is Jose Delgado. I think the young upcomer has enough power to stop the fight here, and I think Nathaniel Wood's chin is going to get cracked for, I believe it's the first time.
He did get clipped by John Dodson. It was like 5 years ago, though. It's been a while. He hasn't been finished in terms of a submission even longer than that. It's been a while before that. But we've seen so many examples of him getting hurt, getting put on the edge, and then finding a way back in. So he's clearly a guy that's tough, wants to stay in the fight, but he could definitely be hurt. He could be put on the ropes, right? You look at, what does Delgado do that makes him special? He's just dangerous in all positions, right? Willing to throw up submissions, willing to go attack, willing to get after you, willing to push the fight for 15 minutes, and he's hard to kill. His one loss on his record was against Chris Makate. Chris Makate, he's a talented regional fighter, right? He's had some setbacks. He's had a couple of tough outcomes, but you just look at his body of work. The guy was an All-American wrestler, I think, at ODU. This is off the top of my head, so if I get any details wrong about Makate, my apologies to him. But he's definitely a talented guy. And you look at what Makate was able to do, he was able to take him down pretty consistently. So I think that if you're looking for what's the, path to victory for Nathaniel Wood, where he justifies his price, where he looks, hindsight like, wow, what a value play was available on Nathaniel Wood. You look at Wood, he's averaging 1.4 takedowns per 15 minutes in terms of his takedown accuracy, 48%. In terms of his takedown defense, 72%. He's averaging 0.6 submission attempts per 15 minutes. So Nathaniel Wood can mix it up in the grappling, right? We know that about his UFC sample size. And Delgado, he kind of played a little bit of bully ball with guys he's bigger than, going out there throwing him around a little bit. But Nathaniel Wood, he's a technical guy. He's a pretty savvy guy. And I will also just bring it back to the fact, you said you thought Namath might finish him. I thought Wood might finish Namath, bro. I had Namath money line, like plus 225. I was like, I'm not betting against, this guy in the desert. You guys can put together your context clues. I was just like, I'm not doing that. And then you look at Nathaniel Wood, he was kind of hard done there, right? And now he's got to go back to the scene of the crime, right? He knows that they kind of fucked him already, right? Like he went out there, the ref fucked him, the judges fucked, any way you want to slice it, right? They let, Namath get away with one there. He stalled a little bit. He had to hold on for dear life to not get finished at the end by Nathaniel Wood. And I think that Delgado's a tough kid, man. I think that it's very difficult to put away a guy like Delgado. So I think the way you do it, if you're going to do it, is you got to out-grapple him. Like you have to just – I've always said, like, it doesn't matter how tough you are. You're a tough guy. You get put in a choke. You go to sleep like anybody else, right? Like, you can be a really tough guy. A guy who's snoring isn't that tough, right? So I just feel like Nathaniel Wood, when you got, 21-6 record, when you got all this UFC experience to fall back on, when you got a guy who got, run for his wrestling shoes, by Chris McCate, you just say to yourself, what if Nathaniel Wood goes out there and kind of gets savvy with some of these trips and these takedowns? I'll remind people, Nathaniel Wood went out there with Charles Jourdain, and he honestly, like, punked him in the wrestling in ways that are, like, embarrassing. I thought Charles Jourdain had to retire after I watched that fight. I swear to God, just watch it. It was like Nathaniel Wood was just punking him, man. Like, take him down, kick him off his feet. Like, just made it look really easy at times. And now we've seen Jourdain drop down to 135. How's he doing? He's on a hot streak. He's looking like $1 million. And so I do find this fight one of the most difficult to call on the card. I feel like Delgado wins if this is a striking-based fight. Like, I like his power more. I like his durability more. I like some of the, willingness to grab a hold of somebody, be simple, basic, and effective, right? Grab a hold of somebody, throw a knee through their head. Doesn't matter if they're a tough guy either, right? You can just shatter their jaw, put them down, right? Delgado's that guy. I think he's a little more violent and dangerous on the feet. But when I just compare, like, with the savviness, with the technicality, could Nathaniel Wood take this guy down and show him a little bit of a veteran lesson on the mat? You definitely see that happening, right? And especially if you're talking about, Nathaniel Wood, last fight of your contract, you go out there and maybe be conservative, but still look for the finish. How do you do that? You grapple, and you grapple hard. And I think that he could do that for 15 minutes. So for me, I'm kind of interested in some, let's say, contrarian angles in terms of maybe looking at some sub props in this one and things like that. Does go along with the violence that some other people, yourself included, have shouted, which I could see happening. But I could also see that violence being, hey, Nathaniel Wood gets rocked, he shoots a takedown, Delgado's able to get him in a front choke. Vice versa, Nathaniel Wood comes out there, shoots takedowns, gets on top of this guy, throws some ground and pound, puts some doubt in his mind, gets a choke, gets a good position, is able to put him away. So for me, that's one way I'm going to be looking at this fight. But I want to say shout out to my guy, Dan Levy, in the chat, says smash the like button for my brothers. Appreciate you, my man. I hope that you're fired up for this fight. I know that I am. And I think that it should be a good one, man. So fight to watch, to use some half the battle terminology, this certainly could be one of them because Delgado represents the future of the division. 27 years of age, a guy who's still got a lot of room to grow. He's only had 11 professional fights. Nathaniel Wood, he is in what I call a win now situation, right? He does not have time to lose this fight. If he loses this fight, he's probably cut from the UFC. His earnings going down, and it's going to be unfortunate. So for Nathaniel Wood, there's a lot to play for this weekend, and I'm going to be looking at takedown ladders as another potential angle for the Nathaniel Wood side because I wouldn't want to deal with this long, tall son of a gun on the feet. Take him down to the ground where we're all the same height, right? I think that that's a little bit of a wise game plan for Nathaniel Wood. Anything you want to add before we move to the next one, buddy?
Not at all. I think you covered the one point I would say I left out was with the wrestling. I think that would be the path to victory. I agree for Nathaniel Wood. Very interesting fight, very compelling fight. One of the few on the card, I would say.
Let's see if they screw Nathaniel Wood again. You know, let's see if they have another one in them, right? Oh, next up, my man, we had a financial opportunity taken from us when Walter Walker's fight was canceled on short notice. Fucking brutal. We were all fired up about that one, right? Walter has just been a printer for me in some of these recent fights. I had Bresky on the money line fading Walter Walker. I had the ends by sub against Nzechiku, which cashed in a shocking quickness at plus 4xx. So Walter Walker, I love you, brother. You know, a couple more of these, I'm going to have to name a child after you, right? But I also talked very highly about Louis Sutherland before his fight was canceled. Not to say like this guy's the future of the heavyweight division, but got the personality. He's got some of the intangibles. Hard to finish. You know, 3 losses, all of them via decision. So you just look at this guy and say to yourself, could he present some challenges to Walter Walker in that he's hard to finish? Yeah, and that he's, you know, not completely lost in the grappling like a lot of heavyweights, sure. But the problem I feel is that I think Walter Walker has the ability to not only, you know, go for these leg locks, but just to get takedowns, right? You think back to that Bresky fight. Bresky was just good at getting back up to his feet, maintaining a basic position, fight hands, get back up, and turn and phase and start throwing hands again, right? Sutherland is a little bit more of a big body. And when you get a big body like that to the ground, and they're kind of like a roly-poly muscle man, one takedown could be hard to get up from, right? And so I feel like Sutherland, maybe if he's able to dig some underhooks, keep the fight upright, he's able to compete here. I just feel he's probably going to get taken down in this fight. And Walter Walker on top, I feel like he's shown that his cardio is a lot better than it was when he got to the UFC. Even when he came to the UFC, my problem was I thought he would get takedowns but not be able to consolidate top position. Now it looks like he's getting a little bit better at understanding where he's dangerous. And if he goes out there and is falling back for leg locks and stuff, for me, that will show a regression in his game. If he goes out there and he's able to get to the top position, you know, put this guy in bad spots, ground and pound him a little bit, I feel like he could be the first guy to finish Louis Sutherland just by putting him under pressure on the ground, you know, because it's one thing to be in fights where, you know, you go back and forth and you mix it up on the feet and everybody has a chance. But it's another thing when a big heavy man is on top of you, threatening you with submissions, beating you up, taking your air away. And, you know, especially when Sutherland was preparing for a completely different style matchup, and now he's got this. Walter Walker is kind of knowing in every fight, I'm going to go out there and grapple very aggressively against these guys more often than not. And he's also shown he can go out there, light somebody up with some power early and hurt him, right? So getting to the submission sometimes is a mere formality after he does some damage on the feet. And in this fight, I don't expect him to go out there and knock out Louis Sutherland with a punch standing, but I could see him getting Louis into a bad position on the ground where the ref is forced to intervene. What do you think about this one?
You know, it's I feel like a very binary matchup for me. If the fight stays upright, I think Louis Sutherland's going to be the better striker, not by a wide margin, but he just mixes everything up a little bit better and throws more precise combos, I would say. Walter, a little bit sloppy with the striking. He's kind of slow with it, but we all know his game. He rolls leg locks and heel hooks, and this guy is really good at it. We saw a couple of videos on Instagram from the fight camp for his last fight that got canceled, and the dude was borderline flinging himself, scissor legs. I don't even know what to call it. I'll have to send you the video, Liam. You could probably explain this better than I can. Catches his coach's legs, flips him over, gets the heel hook within like 10 seconds. Now that's some shit you just don't see at heavyweight. You don't see guys doing this. So guys aren't used to defending these submissions, let alone these flying heel hooks that he's introducing now. So what happens is it creates a fear. It creates a sense of panic. When guys panic in MMA, they forget everything they do. They don't know jiu-jitsu. They don't know striking. They don't know anything. They lose their adrenaline. So all of that is why this guy gets his submissions, and he's damn good. Like we just can't take it away from him. I think he subs Louis Sutherland, man. I think he gets him to the ground and finds his submission, whether it's a heel hook or by a different submission. I think Louis Sutherland on the mat is a liability. So not a shocker. Line is minus 340, minus 350. So yeah, give me Walter Walker. Under 1.5 submission.
There you have it. So we're both going with Walter Walker here, but I am just noting that, I like Louis Sutherland. I think he's a good fighter. I think he'll win some fights in the UFC. Fun style, good on the mic, like lots of like. I just think tough style to enter the UFC against in Walter Walker. So let's find out how he does. This will tell us a lot about his potential, I think. All right, man. Next up. What's a good way to describe this fight? I think both these guys are very vulnerable, Wiz. That's the way that I would describe this, right? You've got a guy in Silwadi who all of his professional losses are via knockout, many of which in brutal fashion early in the first round, right? He's been clipped later on in fights as well, but you just see like the knockout losses that are really scary for him are him just getting clipped, put down hard in the first round. And you look at Camilo on the other side. I gotta, do a little toot toot of my own horn because I did say Gabe Green was a live underdog against Mateus Camilo, and I did talk about Gabe Green via submission in that fight. And it's hilarious watching back the footage there because Camilo had a good attempt, going for a sub off his back, but the second he didn't get it, he's feeling sorry for himself. He's feeling tired, and he just gave it up, man. And for me, he's 24 years of age, is it possible he grows out of that? We've seen in Oliveira, we've seen these guys, like, again, I keep a very open mind, 24 years of age, a lot could change for this guy. He could still just be, maturing into himself, maturing into his physicality. I heard that he got a deviated septum, fixed right in his nose. I have to look into this myself, but I try and keep my ear to the streets, and that was the word on the street is his cardio, is a little bit better now. And for me, seeing is believing, right? His cardio did not look great to me last time against Gabe Green. And, I like the aggression. I like his willingness to go for attacks. I like his, looking for offense in all positions. But you have to make good decisions, and when you're on the top and you're in the mount and you go for a triangle and fall out of the mount, if you do not finish that triangle, it was a mistake, period. It just was a bad idea. It was a huge mistake to sacrifice a great position for a much inferior position. And so I think that, you've got on the one side a guy in Camilo who I'm not confident in his stick-to-itiveness if the fight gets difficult. I've seen him tap out several times. I've seen him, face adversity and respond by giving up, right? And again, I say this within the context of he's out there fighting, right? It's a dangerous thing. If you got to get out of there, you got to get out of there. But we got to call it the way we see it. And Sawadi on the other side, I don't think he can take a great punch. So I feel like this fight has violence kind of written all over it, in the sense that I could see Sawadi, getting knocked out. I could see him landing big punches too, because he does throw, decent shots himself. I could see Camilo, tapping out like he has several times. Camilo also showed in that fight against Gabe Green, he's willing to throw up subs. He's willing to get aggressive in the grappling. He's got his own stuff, his own offense that he believes in. So would I be stunned if he went out there and submitted Al Sawadi? Particularly if he submitted him after rocking him on the feet, which we know is very possible? No. So for me, I feel like violence is like, open 10 different ways here, right? I could see it round 1. I could see it round 3. I could see it round 2. Like, take your pick. I could see a knockout. I could see a submission. I could see a TKO. I could see a DQ. It's like I just could see these guys getting down and the fight not going. So for me, that's the way I lean on this one. Lean towards violence. If you press me, the ABCs say always bet on cardio, but they always say always bet on chin. And for that reason, it makes it very hard to click one of these guys. I'll ever so slightly lean towards Sawadi based on pure narrative. Like, again, if this goes to the scorecards, if they somehow find a way to eke over, I think they're going to be raising Sawadi's hand more often than not here, right? But on the other side, I do think you just have to give Camilo the credit that he's an offensive dynamo. For the first 7 minutes or whatever, he's going to come out. He's going to be aggressive with the hands. He's going to be dangerous with those. And he's got the ability to mix in the submissions as well, if you get out of position. So I feel like it's a violent fight. What do you think, man? Bless you, by the way.
Thank you. Hey, I can't believe you caught that while I was on mute. um, Camilo, I think in his last fight, a lot of people got the sense that his cardio is bad, and rightfully so. But you look at the position he was in where he was squeezing for the submission, I think he just thought he had it, and it was close, and gassed himself out, let out all his energy, he squeezed too hard, and kind of just fell apart. Silwadi, very liable on the feet to get hurt, to get chinned, to get dropped. He almost is scared when he feels someone's power. Point blank, you look at the Loic Razabov fight, and once he felt Loic's power, he was almost running around the cage trying to get takedowns at opportune times when Loic was overthrowing his shots, and Loic also gassed out. So in a fight where I think Silwadi is facing someone similar to his last matchup, in a sense where power striker who can somewhat maybe defend the takedowns a little bit, I would say that Loic's takedown defense is much better than Camilo's. I do think that Camilo, though, is a more technical striker, and from what I'm hearing from the gym is that this guy is giving people their hardest rounds. So that's promising to hear from the Camilo side. And they say that this guy has really good cardio. So, I mean, as you mentioned, seeing is believing. But I can take that point and keep it in the back of my mind. I still think this fight is very much a coin flip, because if Silwadi is able to land takedowns early and zap the cardio of Camilo, he can just ride it out for 3 rounds, potentially get a late finish. If this fight stays on the feet, I think it's all Mateus Camilo, and I think he knocks out Silwadi. An interesting way to play this is Silwadi round 3 and then Camilo round 1, round 2. I'm not saying that Silwadi can't win in round 1 and round 2, but he doesn't really have that kind of show-stopping power. I think his type of stoppage win is going to be later on in the fight via attrition. So I think that's the ideal way to target it, but I don't really think this fight goes all 3 rounds. So I'm looking at unders. Let's see where we're at right now. So under 1.5 is at plus 153. I would take the under 2.5. I think 1.5 is a little bit too risky there. But yeah, for me as a pure pick, I'm gonna pick Mateus Camilo. I think he's gonna be able to make Silwadi feel his power early and make him a little bit more hesitant to get up close. That's only gonna help his takedown defense. So yeah, give me Camilo as the pick, but I'm staying away personally.
Yeah, one other thing I would consider, obviously price dependent, I don't have the price in front of me, would be the Al Sawadi decision only market. I feel like a lot of his losses here are him getting violently finished. Whereas I feel like if the fight goes to the cards, that probably means he got a couple takedowns, he got to some good positions, that kind of thing. So that's just a way I'd look to play him that's maybe a little bit of a risk down, as opposed to, going out there and just hoping that he doesn't get knocked out, because I do think that's a huge liability for him. So for me, lean towards the under 2.5 here as well. And that's the way I see it going down. Anything else that we should add here, or should we move to the next one, my man?
No, let's move to the next one. I think both these guys have still yet to prove anything in the UFC, so we don't have too much data to go off of at the higher levels. So I think this is a fight where we can gather a lot of information.
Awesome, man. Next up, we've got an absolute banger on tap. This is Mateusz Rebecki against Ludovic Klein. And I have to say, man, I get compared to both these guys, depending on your internet forum. I'm literally fighting myself, so I'm going to be busy as shit this weekend. You know what I'm saying? I'm training for a guy that I really respect on the other side. No, I'm kidding, of course. But, we've got Rabisti, right, coming off of a absolute war with Chris Duncan. That was awesome, right? Great fight, and made a great account of himself. Chris Duncan made the right adjustments, big guy, heavy, strikes for a lightweight, was able to go out there, take the big damage from Rebecki, give the big damage back, and get the win. Super close fight, I felt like, but ultimately Duncan just did a little bit better work. He just had a little bit better optics. He was wearing the damage a little bit better. I think he looked 10 levels above Rebecki? I really didn't. I thought it looked like a really honest fight where just one guy was a little bit bigger, and that made a huge difference. And in this fight, the bigger guy is Ludwig Klein. You know, even though he moved up from 145, you know, he is a little bit bigger in terms of that length, that reach. But I think of Rebecca as a guy who, you know, presents interesting problems. He comes forward, throws very hard. You look back at the Carlos Diego Ferreira fight, I think people forget that, you know, Carlos Diego Ferreira was getting his fucking shit rocked in the first round. You know, he's getting his ass whooped in that fight. And then he just was like, all right, time to turn up. And he just turned up, gave him a veteran lesson, gave it to him in rounds 2 and 3, you know, was able to do some big damage to his eye. And the thing that really scares me about Rebecca is like, it's now becoming a common occurrence for his eye to swell up. It's becoming a common occurrence for him to get those big, you know, cuts, gashes around his eyes, around his orbitals, you know, a lot of scar tissue there. So those are things that are definitely concerning for me with Rebecca. But the thing that makes me feel like he's a live underdog in this spot, and you can tell me if you disagree here, brother, is that I look at a guy like this and I say to myself, who's the better grappler? I don't have much of a question. I think Rebecca is like clearly a better grappler than Ludwig Klein. I think the better wrestler is also Rebecca, right? So then it comes down to me, all right, who is the better striker? And I would say Ludwig Klein is a more clean striker. He's a more explosive striker in terms of his kicks, especially. Like he can kind of snap up a head kick fast. You know, that used to be the pre-UFC highlight. Like, boom, he just goes upstairs with that left high kick that nobody sees coming. But in the UFC, you know, he's had power, right? He dropped Thiago Moises every which way but loose, hurt him several times. But the finishing instincts left a lot to be desired. Like, he's not finishing very many guys. And on the other side, Rebecca, you know, he's been fighting fucking tough opponents, guys that are hard to beat, much less put away. And he's making a really honest account of himself. He's having big moments, you know. Even we talked about Loic Radzhabov and how he looked at against one opponent. How did he look against Rebecca? He got his ass whipped in that fight, right? Like just getting chopped away with low kicks, getting walked down with pressure, and he got finished there. And the thing about Rebecca and Klein that I have to, you know, think to myself here is like, who do I think is a little bit more durable in terms of like, or even a little bit tougher, let's say? I would say Rebecca. Like Rebecca is willing to go to dark places to try and win these fights, right? Even when he's like, all right, I might not win this one. Like I'm still going to push forward, try and make it to the end. That's a tough guy. And we've seen Ludwig Klein. He's an athlete. He's a front runner. He's a, you know, call it whatever you want. He's a guy that starts off fights hot and is very dangerous. But if you make him work, if it's a hard fight, if it doesn't go clean like he hoped, he can start to get some self-doubt. He can start to feel sorry for himself. He can start to get tired. He can start to wilt in the later rounds. And, you know, Rebecca, I've seen him lose the later rounds by getting his eyes shut, by getting his face, you know, busted open. I've never seen him just like kind of wear her down in terms of I don't want to be here anymore. My cardio is failing me. The guy has deep experience outside the UFC in title fights, in big fights, in fights against, you know, talented guys. And back on Contender Series, guys, I bet Rebecca by sub, and he went out there and got, you know, like such an awkward position. I believe it was against Rodrigo Ligio, and he was like off to the side on like a back take and like damn near pulled the guy's head off. Rebecca, if he gets this fight to the ground, I think he might show people what time it is a little bit with his grappling. He's got a very good armbar series. He's got a dominant top style. He can be very heavy from the top position. And he does have a number of submissions he can work as well. So for me, you know, I really respect Klein as a striker. I think on the feet, he's dangerous here and he could have his moments. But I ultimately just think the better skills all around slightly go to Rebecca. And I thought that, you know, Ludwig Klein might have what it takes to D up the takedowns against Gamrot, to look for his offense up the middle, right? Because Gamrot, I thought, was ripe for the picking, right? Charles went out there and beat him, but I had said I thought RDA could knock him out, and he dropped him badly with a flying knee early in the fight. It's like I kind of had a bunch of receipts on Gamrot. I did the same thing with Hooker, right? And I said maybe Klein could go out there and do it, but I didn't feel as bullish as a Dan Hooker plus 340 or something, right? And Klein disappointed me in that fight because he's been in the UFC for a long time and he's had a lot of time to grow and learn on the job. And he's had a bunch of fight minutes in the UFC. and he just didn't have it against Gamrot. And he didn't show the greatest IQ, and he didn't make the greatest adjustments over the course of the fight, and he slowed down over the course of 15 minutes. He was not him. And Rebecca, for the fact that he might not be Chris Duncan, but I just feel like he can go out there and compete in this fight. So for me, it's a dog or pass situation. How do you feel about this one, my man?
Interesting fight. There's a lot of angles that we have to look at here because both fighters, we do have quite a bit of tape on them. We really know who these guys are. And Rebecca is a dude that goes out there and is well-rounded wherever this fight goes. What he lacks is head movement and head strike defense because this guy, after every single fight, you look at his highlights that he's not, where he's not finishing the fighter in the first round. Almost looks like both his eyes are closed. He's bleeding from multiple different areas, and his face just looks like a balloon. And then on the other hand, Ludovic Klein is someone who, moved up to 155. A lot of people really gave him a lot of praise for the 3-fight win streak he went on. I just really am not convinced at the level of competition. I mean, let's look back here. You're looking at AJ Cunningham. You're looking at Thiago Moises, the ghost of him. You're looking at Roosevelt Roberts, and then the loss to Mateus Gamrot whenever he took the one step up. And as we mentioned in UFC Rio, Gamrot's taken a huge step up to Charles Oliveira. So we already know that Gamrot is not amongst the elite. Now, in this fight, I just see it going the same way as the Gamrot fight if Rebecca decides to pursue the wrestling and the grappling, because I think in the wrestling and the grappling where Rebecca and Gamrot differ, Gamrot's more of a volume takedown artist who will look to control you from side control a lot. And then Rebecca is in there from half guard. He wants to elbow you in the face. He wants to smother you. He'll look for submissions. He will try to land ground and pound to open up the submissions, which is what I love. And I think he's going to do it in this fight. I think he's going to land volume takedowns here against Klein, who does seem to struggle against dudes who are a little bit more physical, who do have the takedown threat and the wrestling threat in their back pocket. In the striking, I think it's actually very competitive, maybe a little bit leaning more towards the Klein side, 65-35, just because, A, it's the power and the rate that Rebecca absorbs it. But more than that, it's the reach advantage here for Klein is really massive. Rebecca is going to have to crash in the pocket every single time to land what he wants to, because he's not really the counter type of striker. He's the one that's usually on the gas pedal, pressuring, moving forward. And that's just going to be a little bit of a struggle here against Klein if he's able to effectively circle and use his footwork. But if Klein just walks backwards, Rebecca's going to crash in, land a couple strikes, bowling ball his way into a double leg, get you down there. And I think it's rinse and repeat there. So, yeah, I think it's Rebecca here. I think he finishes Ludovic Klein later on in the fight.
Nice, man. I will say KDO Bets in the chat says, Baja Mondays, you forgot that fight. Don't cherry pick. The one thing I will note is I don't think Baja Mondays is a very good analog, right? The reason I didn't bring him up in my breakdown is just because he's like a Chilean stand-up kickboxer, right? He does have a decent front headlock series, but he's just not really a guy that looks or fights like Rebecca, right? Like Rebecca, short, stocky, heavier top pressure, a guy that likes to throw the big overhands on the feet, chopping inside low kicks, but not really a guy who's going to have those long man strikes like Baja Mondays. But I do agree, like that's a good win for Klein. Klein does have a handful of good wins throughout his UFC tenure. I would just posit that most of the really good names on his record are guys that have defeated him, right? But he does have a couple of serious wins as well. I think that's a fair note by you, KDO. So thank you for that.
Let's not get it twisted, though. Bahamundes of 2.5 years ago is not the Bahamundes of today. The Bahamundes that was getting outstruck by John Makdessi is not happening today. So I'll just put it there.
Fair play. And the other thing to note is, split decision with Devontae Smith, a little bit questionable there. The Trezano fight, did not age great either. Although that one was at least somewhat controversial, he got tapped by Nate Landwehr in the third round there. His cardio abandoned him when faced with pressure, right? And I do think that Rebecca, for all of his other faults, that's one thing he does pretty well is he pressures hard aggressively, whether it's on the feet or in the wrestling. He comes forward, he attempts offense. So should be interesting. All right, next up, we got Ikram Aliskerov taking on Jin Young Park, the Iron Turtle, the people's champion, right? A super popular guy in the community. I think that this is a weird fight, man. You have a fight here where Jin Young Park is, very tenured in the UFC, a ton of experience under his belt, got some grappling chops, a guy that, he's basically fought a who's who in the division for, the most part, right, over the course of his career. And when you just look at some of the losses for Jin Young Park, some of them have been controversial. They've been close decisions. They've been fights where they were super competitive. He landed some big offense on Gregory Rodriguez, got overzealous, got clipped back on the chin. Like you've seen Jin Young Park have some ups and downs, right? But clearly a talented fighter with skills in all positions. Ikram Aliskerov on the other side, he's still a little bit more of an unknown commodity, right? He's clearly very talented, but we know that, maybe his cardio is a little bit front loaded, right? Like maybe a guy that the longer the fight goes on, you have a little bit of questions about how he's going to start to fare in those extended exchanges. I would say for my taste, he's the more physical grappler of these two guys. Like, does he do everything super smooth, super technical? Not every time, but can he rip a Kimura? Can he get to a dominant position, hold somebody down, be a big body on top? Yeah, he could do those things. So I think Ikram comes out early in this fight, has some success here, and I'm quite confident in is that he could knock out somebody like Jin Young Park. Even though Park's a tough guy, you look back at that RoboCop fight, he can be hurt, he can be cracked. Eric Anders had him, doing some salsas, right? Having a little bit of wobbly legs from connecting a couple times. And I do think Ikram, he's got those big shots, up the middle. He's got an ability to take those kicks as well upstairs. He can throw big punches. So I would not be surprised if Ikram hurt him or even, found the finish in the first 2 rounds with his submission game, with his, powerful striking. The longer the fight goes, the better chance I think for Jin Young Park here. Park is just a guy that likes to build into a fight, likes to pick up the pace, likes to pick up the pressure. As you start to get tired, he will pick it up on you, wrap the wrist, look for ground and pound, look to take you to the ground. I kind of like, Park as a live betting angle better than a pre-betting angle, just because I feel like you avoid a lot of his loss equity by not betting him before the first round, where I think Ikram is the most dangerous. And I don't think Jin Young Park is very likely to finish him in the first round. That's just not really his game, not really how he's coded. So when I see, plus 210, it's an okay price. It's a price that I'm like, could it pique my interest? Maybe, but it's just like, there's so much downside risk of him getting finished in my view that I'd rather have a live click or, maybe have a small bet on Jin Young Park round 3 and hope he's able to go out there and pace this guy late. Because the other thing we know, Jin Young Park, needed a very close one on the cards in a fight where he clearly looked like the better fighter, especially down the stretch against Nordiev. But it's the fouls, it's the outside interference, it's the, dealing with the ref and the official and the doctor and the commission and all these different outside actors that I do think are all going to be tilted towards the Ikram side, right? Ideally. So this is a fight where I'm going to pick Ikram. I'm going to lean towards him getting the job done. But I do think that if you guys are somebody that, watches these events closely and live bets them during, Park is somebody you're going to want to monitor in the live betting market because he's a guy that can pick up the pack if you start to get tired and take over a fight. What do you think here, Wiz?
Brother, I really see this fight awfully similar to you in a sense where Ikram is one of the fighters that I tend to like fading in the division. Very front loaded. We kind of have seen it throughout his career where he tends to slow down after the first 3 to 4 minutes, and his chin is starting to show to be a little bit questionable. We haven't really seen it extended all too much. And I think Jin Young Park is the guy to extend him into the late second, third round. I do see the potential for Ikram finding an early finish because Jung Park, although very sound technically, does leave some openings defensively to where the straight shots from a guy like Ikram will land. His guard isn't like fully closed. He has the opening in between his hands and just blocks kind of close to his face and almost eats the shots, bumps into him. And that's, a liability against a guy like Ikram who's going to throw the straight shots with full power, try to get you out of there every time. If he's able to extend him though and wear on the gas tank, really pay attention to the gas tank towards the end of round one for Ikram if it gets there, because it would be a very great live opportunity for Park. And that's the way I'm targeting this fight. That's the way I literally, once I looked at the fight before even taping it, I kind of already knew that Ikram was going to be a favorite of some sort and that I would look to target this fight after round one because there's no way I'm betting Ikram at a big favorite price at any point until he proves more to us in the UFC. And Jun Park is a guy that we have a lot of data on, a lot of information and tape on, to where we know he's going to go out there and give it his all. And he shows up. He's not the greatest everywhere, but he's a good 65% everywhere. So for me, I'm picking Jun Park to win this fight straight up. And I think taking him in a live position after round one, if it gets there, is the optimum way of playing him.
Yeah, man. We've seen Ikram struggle before here, right? He's returning to the scene of the crime, got knocked out viciously in a main event by Robert Whittaker, right? And I don't think Jin Young Park is, the same kind of knockout threat, but I do think that he's a guy that builds, right? And he's a guy that applies pace and goes forward and pushes his offense. And, I do think he's going to give himself a chance. He's going to fight hard for your dollar always. But, I also noted in my research here, maybe you look at Park's split decision, 16-1, right, as a potential angle here. Because I think at least one of these judges already has it circled for Ikram, but we can leave it there as we move to the next fight here, where we've got Nasrat Hakparas taking on Quillan Salkild at 155 pounds. And another closely lined fight, another one that I think is closely lined for good reason. Why don't you start us off on this one, Wiz? Fun fight going down in the lightweight division.
This is probably the hardest fight for me to call. A lot of reasons, and in my head, I already know who I'm picking. I was going back and forth on Hakparas, on Salkild, back to Hakparas, back to Salkild. You look at the tape, and Quillan is a dude that loves his wrestling and loves his grappling. He's really good at it, tall for the division, and is an okay striker. Like, I'm not going to harp on his striking too much because I think he leaves a lot to be desired. He does get hit a lot. Don't like his reactions when he gets hit. And against a guy like Nasrat, who has all the experience, all of the UFC vet savvy, someone who's going to go out there and you can reliably count on him to throw volume that's effective and to fight at a very high level of IQ. The dude is very smart in there. He's very calculated with what he throws, and his game planning and his coaching seems to be top notch. And that's why he squeaks out every close fight. The dude knows how to win. And that's when you can tell a vet from someone who's not. And I think this is just a vet lesson for Quillan Salkild. I'm not saying that Quillan Salkild is a worse fighter than Nasrat. I think that Quillan Salkild is just green at the moment at 25 compared to someone in Nasrat who has mountains and heaps of UFC experience on him. So I'm picking Nasrat. I think he's going to be able to land a ton more volume. I think he might be able to even hurt Salkild. If this fight gets to the mat, though, I do think Nasrat is a wash there. I do think that Nasrat's takedown defense is pretty good. I'll leave it at that.
There you have it, my man. I think that this is a fascinating fight, because I feel like this could be a tale of two fights in the sense of if Salkild is able to get like his takedown game going here, I think like once he consolidates the top position, that could end up being a disaster for Nasrat, right? Like just we haven't seen Nasrat against a lot of great offensive grappling threats. And I do think Salkild is at least very aggressive, right? Willing to push his wrestling, willing to push it as a proactive threat, as a reactive threat. If he's being pressured, his answer is normally wrestle, right? Like just reactively shoot a takedown into their hips as they come forward. And I do think that will offer him opportunities to get on top of Nasrat, right? So I could see Nasrat building back up to his feet, getting back up, separating hands, pushing away. I could see him winning the fight. I could see him knocking him out. I could see him winning a decision. I could see Nasrat winning here, right? But I think the way he would lose in my mind is like Salkild taking him down and either taking him down a lot, right? So 10 takedowns and 6 minutes of control and he gets the decision that way. Or I would see it being Salkild taking him down once or twice and submitting him on the mat, honestly. Because I don't see Salkild winning this fight via knockout very often, right? I think Nasrat, it's been quite some time since I can remember him getting badly hurt in a UFC fight. He's a pretty tough guy. Even when he does get hurt, tends to rally pretty well from adversity. Drew Dober, I think, hurt him back in the day. That guy literally leads the division in knockouts. So, you got to give him a little bit of fair play there. And at 30 years of age, Nasrat, I think, has a lot of motivation. He's got a ton of experience to fall back on. And Salkild is one of these guys, like, he could easily rebuild from here. You're 25. You take your first loss in the UFC, your first loss since, by the way, his professional debut. The guy has been on a 9-fight win streak ever since. And now he's coming on short notice to fly in from halfway across the world. I'll just be level with you guys. I don't think Yanal Ashmus has proven very much as a UFC fighter. He's got a nice win via knockout against Sam Patterson. If they rematched again at 170, who do you think wins the fight? I think Sam probably wins that fight if they rematch at 170. I could be wrong about that, but that's my sincere belief. So then it's like, okay, what about Salkild's resume? Gage Young, has he had a lot of success since he came to the UFC? I like Gage Young in terms of his skills and his talents that I saw, but I think he would be better suited at a 45 or something, right? At 55, you're going to be dealing with big guys. You're going to be dealing with guys that got a lot of skills. You got to really show up prepared or it's going to be tough, right? Then you look at, all right, Salkild also beat Anshul Jubilee. I'm not even going to say anything more about that. So you just look at that's the body of work at this level in the UFC. And then you look at the other side, and Nasrat Haqparast in the UFC, guys, has fought Esteban Ribovic, Jared Gordon, Jamie Malarkey, Landon Quinones, John McDessie, Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, Rafa Garcia, Alex Munoz, Drew Dober, Joaquim Silva, Thibault Guti, Mark Diakese, Marcin Held. Those are all pretty solid guys with the exception of two of them. They're all pretty solid. They're all decent guys. They all offer something, right? And so I just feel like you have to imagine, unless Salkild is just way better than we're expecting on the mat, which again, I'm saying I think that's a potential upside for him here, right? Is hey, this guy's black belt, this guy's 25, he's got the takedowns, he's just lights out on the ground. That's my bullish case for Quillen Salkild coming in here. But if, you see him not getting takedowns and he's got to do this fight on the feet, we saw simple boxing pressure from Gage Young was enough to get this guy uncomfortable, backing up, and lost a round. And it's I just feel when I look at this, I don't make every breakdown about who's the social media A side and who does the UFC want to win. I try and always give you guys a broad synopsis of my thoughts. When I look at all these other thoughts and then compare it to the fact that Nasrat Haqparast is a massive social media star, 400,000+ on social media at 30 years of age, compared to Quillen Salkild, who's got 9,000-10,000 he could rub together. I'm half kidding, right? Maybe his main account's got 40,000 or something, but it's again a order of magnitude less. So you just look at a guy like Nasrat Haqparast and I say, with all the UFC experience in a favorable part of the world where they're going to be ready to support this guy, where they're going to want to see him do well, unless he gets taken down many, many times or unless he gets submitted, I think damage over control. I think Nasrat Haqparast is going to land more volume. He's a very high volume guy. I think Quillen could compete on volume, but I don't think he can compete on optics if it's a pure striking fight based on what I've seen from him so far. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Nasrat Haqparast. but I'm going to do it quite hesitantly. I think it's a hard fight to call, but give me Nasrat for the pick. Let's say Nasrat via split decision over Quill and Salka.
Love it.
I love it, man. That takes us, of course, to the main card. Guys, as we get started on the main card, I want to just ask everybody who's rocking with us live, go ahead and hit the like button. Get subscribed to the channel if you are new here. Make sure you ring that bell for notifications if you want to know each and every time that we go live. But with that being said, we're on to the main event. We're on to the main card. And that starts with Alexander Rakic and Azamat Murzakanov. It's going down at 205 pounds, light heavyweight division. Alexander Rakic, guys, is 33 years of age. He's coming off of 3 straight losses, and he's basically looking to rebuild his career right now in the UFC. He needs a win. He needs one badly. And he's got to take on an undefeated fighter, Azamat Murzakanov, on the other side, the professional, 36 years of age. So he's 3 years older in this spot. He's the smaller fighter as well. I will just say this, guys. Rakic does check a lot of boxes for me coming in here in terms of what? He is the younger fighter with more professional experience, and he's also bigger in terms of height and reach. That's a lot of predictive categories to be on your side going into a fight, right? So every fight is unique. Every fight is its own matchup. You got to take the matchup details seriously. But you also got to say, if we were just breaking it down and I knew nothing else, I went in blind, and I knew these intangibles, this information about the physicality, the anthropomorphic information, I would be very hesitant to, lay chalk, especially to find out with somebody who's giving up all these categories, right? Who is not particularly active, right? And Murzakanov kind of fights every so often, does not fight with supreme regularity, does not have a super active schedule. So I think that this is a really difficult fight to call. I think it's another crapshoot kind of fight. I lean towards violence here. It seems like people have this idea that, these two guys are going to find a way, to fight the full 15 minutes. Maybe that's possible. I just think of Murzakanov as a proven threat for the full 15 minutes to knock somebody out, right? And on the other side, it's Alexander Rakic. Like, he can throw hard. He could kick you. He could punch you. He could hit you. And the thing that for me could create some interesting dynamics here as well. What if he takes this guy down? What if he puts him on his back? What if he gets him tired? I feel like we saw Rakic get tired against Yuri. I feel like we've seen Murzakanov get tired many times. So if we see Rakic go out there and get Murzakanov tired, what does that fight look like? I feel like there's a lot of variance in a fight like this, right? You've got one guy with a lot of momentum on the Murzakanov side. That's positive, right? That's a thing I like for him. But on the other side, you've got a marketable guy in Alexander Rakic who's been fighting the very best in the division. He has not been coming up aces, right? But he's been going out there making an account of himself, not looking like a total punk. And then you're saying he's 33, right? He could still get this back on the rails potentially, right? He's 6'4". He's a big hulking Adonis of a man. He's got that huge reach advantage. There's a lot to like about the Rocket Alexander Rakic, despite the fact he's been on hard times lately. So for me, I'm going to ever so slightly lean towards Rakic here, but I've been a huge Murzakanov guy throughout his UFC run. Like, I bet him against, Tafan at like -143. And I know he came back and memed him late, but you just look at Murzakanov, like, he's done the thing properly a lot of these times in the UFC. But now I would say he's taking a fight against a real guy, whereas a lot of these other fights have been very winnable fights, right? So I just think that this is where we find out more about Murzakanov. Maybe we find out that he is ready to go against top 5 guys in the light heavyweight division. But for me, it's a prove-it spot for Murzakanov here against a big guy, against a guy who I have to imagine is as motivated as you could be, right? Like, if he loses this fight, Rakic is no longer a title challenger, a contender, like, he's now in the back of the line if he loses this fight. And I feel like it's a winnable fight, and he's got to know that. So it should be awesome, and let's find out who wins. I expect it to be violent. What do you think about this one, Wiz?
I'm going to go on a limb here and say that Azamat Murzakanov is one of the best strikers in the light heavyweight division, technically speaking, and one of the most powerful hitters, too. Man, I'm just rewatching his fights. It's kind of nuts for a dude at 205 to move that quick and to be as technical as he is without sacrificing too much in terms of wrestling defense, but I mean, no one really has tried. I think that gets tested here. I really do think that wrestling defense gets tested here. On the feet, I think this is very much a 50-50 fight. I think whoever lands the more effective strikes and lands cleanly will end up winning the fight on the feet. But if Rakic is smart and his coaches have game planned well, I think they'll employ a takedown heavy game plan here and to just win via ground and pound, whether it's by finishing or whether it's just over 3 rounds, just positionally dominating this guy. And Murzakanov is someone who we don't really know too much about his cardio. All this to say, the reach advantage, the height advantage, the experience advantage, fighting the better fighters. His last fight against Ankalaev, I had it 1-1 going into the third, so that's a good look. The loss against Jan, obviously leg injury there, so you can't really account for too much. And then the one against Ciryl, I personally thought that he was looking great versus Ciryl before the knockout. So what do you pull from that? You pull a guy that is still motivated as ever, still performing at a high level, and as long as he has the proper game plan, I think this line has the potential of looking very absurd. Rakic might be the fighter on the card that has the highest upside in terms of line value, because I think he has the potential of taking this guy down and submitting him in round 1, ground and pounding him in round 1, or just positionally dominating over 3. I'm not going to be one-sided on the breakdown, though, because Murzakanov is a very good striker, as I was mentioning in the beginning of the breakdown. I just think that at 36 years of age, it's a little bit too late to make a title run. Now, also, this guy is not really the most, how am I going to put this? He's not a physical specimen. Like, it doesn't look like he touches the weight room too much. So with all those stats and points being said, I think Rakic goes out there and fights smart, gets the takedowns, and wins via knockout, ground and pound. That's the way I see this fight going. Murzakanov can land some solid shots, but I think once he lands one, Rakic is going to immediately shoot.
There you have it. We both could see the Rocket coming out wrestling. I'll just note as well, guys, that fighting out to go the distance is like minus 140. And, you know, that is sort of what I lean towards here. Murzakanov, I feel like, has a decent killer be killed type of archetype. And obviously he's done all the killing so far in his career, but I just feel like the way he puts himself out there, he's willing to take chances in the pocket, trying to put people down. He's willing to close the distance, looking to put hands on people. And that's because of his frame, right? He's smaller than almost every guy he fights. And when you do that, you know, it just invites a little bit of risk, right? It invites you to get hit as well as it invites you to open up those offensive opportunities. So I'm excited to see this one shake out. And I'll just note, you know, I could see it ending violently for either guy, and I could see either guy winning in round 2 and 3. That's kind of how I see this fight ending. Is like somebody running out of steam in the second or third round here, depending on where the fight takes place. So that's just the way I see it going down. In case people are looking for some long shot props, perhaps. But next up, my man, fun fight in the heavyweight division. We've got Alexander Volkov, the Drago, the long man, the tall man, the Russian, the Ruski, taking on Jailton Almeida Majadinho. Wiz, we'll kick this one over to you, my man. We've got Volkov, tall, long, Russian striker, Jailton Almeida, a little bit more brolic, a little bit more stocky, Brazilian powerhouse grappler. Who wins? How does it go down?
You know, I think this fight's very binary. We got a striker versus a grappler. If this stays in the striking, I am very confident that Volkov wins this fight. And another line that's going to look hindsight ridiculous. On the other hand, if Jailton is able to land takedowns early to zap the cardio of Volkov, I think eventually he'll either find the ground and pound finish, but I think more likely it'll be a rear naked choke submission finish here. Another fight where I think after round 1 you'll get a really good tell as to where the fight's going to head to And if in round one you see that Volkov is defending, maybe not all the takedowns. What if he defends a couple? You see Jelton, start to gas out a little bit. Then you enter in on Volkov if the price is right. I really think that he drops round one, in all honesty, and I think we get a much better price after round one. I just think that Volkov is going to land some effective strikes here and really hurt Jelton. The height is going to be an issue, and surprisingly, though, it's only an inch of reach advantage, so there is that. But I just think that the much better striker, the much faster striker, and Volkov is going to possess a threat in terms of keeping Jelton at bay. He has the long-range weapons. He has the kicks, which he won't really tend to use too much in this fight, so he doesn't get taken down off of him. He's going to rely on the jab, and he's going to rely on the two to the body. Those are going to be shots that really deter the wrestling. If he's able to effectively land, it's his fight to lose. This guy has much more experience. He's a much more complete fighter. It's just unfortunate that Jelton is just such a freaking good grappler. And when he gets you down there, shortly after, you're probably either asleep or tap into something that's really nasty. So give me Volkov here as the prediction here. I think the dog wins. I think Mr. Drago will have his moment finally in the UFC and get a title shot after this one.
Yeah, man, I've always been a big Jelton guy, but I just have to call a spade, man. The Curtis Blades fight for me was a huge letdown. The way I feel is that, Curtis Blades, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, right? Fought a lot of the best guys, losses to both, basically the best guys, right? But normally when he fights a guy who's like a world championship level guy, he's getting cleaned up. He's having a really difficult time. And that fight against Jelton, he definitely got controlled for some time. He got taken down. I told everybody before that fight, I was like, guys, Jelton is going to take down Curtis Blades. I have no doubt in my mind. And he took him down multiple times, right? But he wasn't able to do anything with it, right? Like literally like almost nothing. He basically spent a lot of time and energy holding on to the guy and then ran out of energy real fast. And for me, the reactions to getting hit, I didn't like. The getting gassed in 6 minutes, I didn't like. The strategy of doing no damage, even though you had dominant control positions, I didn't like. So all of that's to say, Jelton clearly has skills. But what he has made a career of doing is taking down guys that are garbage on the ground for the most part, right? Like you take a Danilo Marquez, you take a handful of these guys and you say, okay, this guy has real skills. But for the most part, he's taking down guys that have neither a hope nor a prayer, nor a knowledge of jiu-jitsu, right? And he just beats him up, right? Makes him look bad, shows the difference in athletic levels. And I think we've seen Volkov, think back to an example like the Tabora fight. Tabora is not as good an athlete as Jelton Almeida, no doubt about that. But he was pretty committed to his wrestling attack in that fight. He was committed to his wrestling attack for 15 minutes. And every time he even so much as thought of a level change, he went underhooks, right? Blocked off. He found a way. And you look at a guy like Volkov, and he's got to know the only way he loses this fight is if Jelton's able to take him to the ground. So I do think we're going to see Volkov come out in like a squat. Like he's going to come out with his hands out in front of him, low, bent knees, whatever he needs to do. And he's going to try and survive the first 5 to 7 minutes of the fight and see if he can outlast this guy, because we know that Volkov can fight for 5 rounds. I'll just note back, Curtis Blades looked like he was in cardiac arrest when he was trying to take down Volkov in the 4th and 5th round, right? And like he started to get taken down. He started to get looking like he was going to get finished by Volkov in the late portions of that fight. And you just look at Volkov's ability to do that, wrestle hard with Curtis for 5 rounds, and it does tell me, yes, there's a chance he gets Aspinall, right? Like Aspinall took him down and just went step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. It's possible that Jelton's able to do that here. But when I look at a matchup like this, I say to myself, like, it's a dogger pass for me, given what I know. I thought Jelton at Pick'em against Curtis Blades, I thought was fine pre-fight based on the information we had. post-fight, it's hard to pick a guy that you can't trust to go out there and strike. It's hard to pick a guy that you can't trust to go out there and fight for 15 minutes if the going gets tough. And for Jailton, those are the two things that I just don't – I came away from that fight not feeling confident that I can check those boxes for him. And for that reason, I'm going to slightly lean towards Volkov. Also, I got to say, Rudy G in the chat says, Liam, bro, I thought we were doing a show tonight. I'm hurt. I got to go back and check the DMs. I thought you had said Thursday, my brother. For the show. Also, my laptop has been out of commission today. I haven't even gotten my own documents and everything up to snuff. I had to troubleshoot fixing my laptop with my father on the phone today. So that's what I've been up to, Rudy. But we will touch base on that. We'll make sure that we get that worked out. So apologies there if we had our wires crossed. I thought we were doing something tomorrow. But in either case, anything you want to add on this fight before we move to the next one, brother?
It's a lot easier to prepare for Jailton Almeida than it's going to be for Volkov, is the last point I'll leave you guys with, because really Volkov has to focus on the takedown defense, because you're not gonna improve a lifetime's worth of jiu-jitsu in one fight camp. If he's able to stuff the takedowns, Jailton has nothing. I'll just put it that simple. And for Jailton, he has to prepare for someone who is, I would consider, an elite striker for the division, and especially with the reach that he has on most of the fighters and the reach that he tends to fight at. He keeps his range really well. And I think this is probably the first person that Jailton fights that's going to be much bigger than him. So worth a grain of salt.
There you have it, my man. I was looking to see if I had been on Volkov against Gane, and I honestly can't remember, but I do think that I thought he was live, right? Like in my article, I had said, like, watch out for Volkov split decision, and then he gets fucking jobbed out on the split decision. Brutal outcome for him.
Fight. He won that.
What's that?
He won that fight.
Exactly, right. He won that fight, but he lost that fight. And I do think that the UFC booking this fight is their way of saying, hey, you know what? Let's see, if he could go out there and get it done against Jailton and kind of earn that title shot, right? Because you got a guy, in Jailton who's knocking on the door, but doesn't have that one signature win that they could be like, hey, look at this. Like, he needs to fight for the belt next. Volkov would be a step in that direction, right? But also for Volkov, they kind of had to book him like he won that fight last time, right? So number one contender fight coming off a loss. That's kind of where Volkov's positioned here, and that's a nice place to be. By the way, a lot of these Russian characters, guys, get huge pops in Abu Dhabi. They get a lot of support, vocal support. They get the crowd. They get the judges. They get the refs, right? Volkov might be in that position where some things go, in his direction this week. So we gotta be careful and watch for that. Speaking of, he's a -500 favorite. His name is Umar Nurmagomedov, right? And I think the reason, in part, that he's such a huge favorite here is it's going to be hard to get a decision against Nurmagomedov in Abu Dhabi. And Mario Bautista on the other side, man, if there's one guy who's getting used to springing these upsets and overperforming people's expectations, it is one Mario Bautista. I mentioned against Patchy Mix, I love Patchy Mix. I'm a huge Patchy Mix fan. I did not love that booking for Patchy. I was like, man, you get this guy who has a lot of momentum and you give him a guy who's quiet, like a guy that doesn't have a huge name, doesn't have a huge reputation, but is a really quietly difficult out, a guy that's been stacking wins, a guy that's got his momentum, a guy that stays very active. So I thought he presented a lot of problems to Patchy. I called it a pick'em fight in my view going into it, right? It turned out Mario was a deserved favorite there, right? I still think that, Patchy fought suboptimally. It wasn't a great game plan. It wasn't a great strategy. But also Mario just made him look bad by fighting, in reverse, by fighting going backwards, by moving, by, skirting around the outside, making him chase, making him follow, making him walk onto shots. And I just think in this fight, it's going to be a lot harder to do that to Umar, right? Like, I think Umar probably has slightly better footwork. I think that he's a little bit more dynamic with the kicks. Like Patchy, not really known for his kicking, more of a knee and punch guy. So I feel like Umar, has a good ability to mix in long punches, and he can throw in combination, right? he knocked out Hani Barcelos by accident, just throwing straight shots down the middle. We know that his kicking game is dynamic, and he can mix in his own takedowns, right? We've seen Damon Blackshear go out there, win some wrestling exchanges with Mario Bautista, take him down, put him in some bad spots. Can Umar do that? Like, it seems like he probably can do that, right? So for me, it sucks, right? I wish I felt differently. I will just note it's a dog or pass situation for me, just based on the money line, just based on the dynamics, based on who these guys are, right? I can't look at a guy who's on a huge win streak, who's fighting tough guys, who keeps proving himself time after time, and say, like, yeah, that guy should be plus 500 in a UFC fight against almost anybody, right? I think fighting's a little too volatile for that. But when it comes down to it, I think Mario would need to have like a perfect fight. I think he'd need to go out there and either put this guy away, which is super difficult to do, or he would need to go out there and fight the perfect fight, make himself undeniable on the scorecards, which would take like a virtuoso performance. So for me, Mario accepted a really hard fight against a really hard fighter who's young, who's fast and dynamic, who's got the crowd behind him, who's got a lot going for him here in this fight. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Umar to get the win, probably via decision. But it's just tough, man. It's a really weird one. And the one thing I will note, I do think Umar could clip him as well. Mario, I mentioned tough guy, but I thought Patchy did buzz him a couple times late in that fight. And it just was overshadowed by the fact that Patchy kind of looked not very good in the early going. And I think that Umar, he starts a little bit more dialed, right? He starts hot. And I think over the course of 3 rounds, if this is a 5-round fight, maybe it gets even more interesting, right? Maybe Mario's cardio is able to be a factor late. But I just think over the course of 3 rounds, like Umar's going to know I can empty the tank. I can throw everything I've got and go hard. And I think that's going to be to his advantage. What do you think, Wiz?
I think this fight's very straightforward. I think Umar is just the better fighter wherever the fight goes. And one thing, just while researching this fight and taping Mario Bautista specifically, you look at his record, and I dug deep. This guy is never, well, he's only fought 2 guys that are better strikers than him. One, I'm talking ages ago. This is 2019 against Corey Sandhagen, round 1 armbar. No, pretty good. And then Jose Aldo, who we know what happened in that fight. I don't think Mario Bautista won that fight. It was very close, albeit, but we all
Justice for Aldo plus 135, but continue.
Yeah, justice for Aldo indeed. And in this fight, he's going up against someone who is a much better striker than him, and much faster, much cleaner striker, very educated, and coming off of. We forget Umar was the first of the Nurmagomedovs, I think, to get that big L. And he was almost shunned. We didn't see him on social media at all. We didn't see him post anything. He wasn't marketed. They didn't even want to show him in the training camps for the fighters in their gym up until a month ago. He's also recovering from that broken hand, so we have to keep that in mind. I just don't think that any of that's really going to matter. I think he's coming in angry. He has a chip on his shoulder just from losing that one fight, and he's just going to put a beating on Mario Bautista. I think he finishes Mario Bautista here late 2nd round via knockout.
Umar KO. All right, there you go. I think we both lean that way. I think Mario's a good grappler, but even that fight with Corey where he got submitted, I'm pretty sure he got hurt in that fight on the feet. I have to go back and rewatch it. Obviously, it's a very long time ago, but I'm pretty sure he got hurt on the feet before he got submitted, or excuse me, before he got submitted there. So certainly something to watch for there is that I do think Bautista, for as good as his process is, I think he can be hurt. And I also note, he hasn't lost a decision, but I do think that Blackshear fight could have went either way. Honestly, I thought it was a super close fight. Maybe Bautista deserved to edge it out on the strength of that round 2 and 3, but certainly the early going of that fight, he was kind of getting it put on him a little bit. All right, man, that takes us to the co-main event of the evening, Women's Strawweight Championship. I got to ask you here, Wiz, any contact with Dern? I know she's done some training in California. You ever seen her around the gym, or is this somebody from afar you're watching on TV like the rest of us?
She saw me get beat the fuck up by Tito Vera, that's for sure. She was always in the gym with us, but I'd never really spoke to her in length at all.
Okay, fair enough. Dude, I look at this and I say to myself, okay, it's a rematch, right? Obviously, these two ladies fought before. For me, there's a couple things that are super significant. First of all, the 5-year age gap, right? Mackenzie Dern is 32 years of age. She had a child. She is, in my opinion, still in her physical prime. And you look at on the other side, Verna is 37. I believe she's had a major knee injury, a major knee surgery. And, it's hard to continue fighting at the highest levels when that's the case, right? I think when you just look at Verna's style overall, she's never been knocked out before, but she's definitely been hurt before. She's been clipped. She's had some awkward moments. She's been rocked. And I would also note, you just start going through MMA Decisions is a great resource, right? You can go back and look through all these different decisions. I would encourage you guys, look up Verna Jandiroba, MMA Decisions, and go through the fights that she's lost. You'll notice she oftentimes loses the first and the third round, sometimes the second and the third round. What's the commonality? Oftentimes she's losing the third round, and it's because she starts to tire out. She starts to slow down. She starts to make bad decisions. She starts to she starts to prioritize, attempting offense at the expense of, hey, I don't really have much energy. So like whatever happens after this offensive attempt, it is what it is, like I just got to go spend what I have while I have time to do it. And I feel like in a 5-round setting, I'm a little concerned for Verna Jandiroba, because I do feel like in 2018, a long time ago, she was able to go 5 rounds. She was able to push hard. Is she able to do that at this stage of the game? I have real open questions about that, right? She was very fearful of the grappling of Mackenzie Dern the last time that they fought. They had very similar control metrics the last time that they fought. It was Dern that outlanded her in terms of the strikes, in terms of the significant strikes. So then you say to yourself, okay, what has changed since the last fight? I would say Verna's gotten older. Verna's gotten a little bit slower, and Verna's grappling is as good as ever. It's, still very potent. It's very dangerous. It's very clever. She's excellent on the mat. I just think Mackenzie Dern, it's very like if you're looking for one place to exploit Mackenzie Dern, you probably don't want it to be on the mat because that's where she's very difficult to exploit, right? She's very skilled in her own right there. So then you say, all right, well, what has happened to Mackenzie Dern on the feet? I would argue she's gotten better on the feet. I would argue she's gotten a little bit more composed on the feet, and she's powerful. So she hits hard, and I think she can crack Verna. I think she can outlast Verna. We saw against Amanda Hebos what happened from the first time she fought Mackenzie Dern to the most recent time. The first time Amanda Hebos won the grappling. The second time Mackenzie Dern submitted. So Mackenzie Dern has kind of showed that she has skills in all positions, right? It was a minor miracle she didn't cash my 25-1 KO bet against Angela Hill. You go back and watch that fight, guys. She beat the shit out of Angela Hill. Threw her on her head, slammed her every which way but loose, landed a ton of ground and pound, landed over 100 significant strikes. So what do I know about Mackenzie Dern? I know she can go, mix it up for 25 minutes. She's done it multiple times, especially more recently than her opponent in the UFC. I know that she's 32, her opponent's 37, 5 years, predictive age gap that's favorable in her direction. I know that she's a dangerous ground game. I know that it's difficult to submit her. I think these women are a combined 22-0 career to the submission. I don't really see either of them getting tapped. So then, all right, what is the most likely outcome of this fight? I would say it's Mackenzie Dern via knockout or decision. Like I that's kind of the way I see it going down more often than not. I could even see Mackenzie Dern via sub if Verna's tired. Like I could see Mackenzie rounds 4 and 5 taking over this fight and winning it when Verna is huffing and puffing and, spent a lot of her energy and, hasn't been in a 4th and 5th round in a long time. So that's kind of the way I see this going down, man, is, we talk about it again. I don't mention social media followers for every fight, right? I try and keep it few and far between. But this is another fight where it couldn't be more clear to me who the UFC would like to win here, right? I like Verna. I respect Verna. I used to say I thought Verna, if she got a chance against Zhang Wei Li, could win that fight purely because I thought she was more technical in grappling than Zhang Wei Li. Zhang Wei Li relies on strength, physicality, and she's super explosive. She's also very technical. But I thought Verna's technicality would at least open up some opportunities for her. Against Mackenzie Dern, it's just harder to imagine those opportunities will open up because they're both technically very proficient, right? So for me, I just think that this is the kind of fight where I lean towards Dern finally breaking through, getting that championship belt, and doing it at the expense of Verna's consciousness. I think she's going to knock her out on the feet. What do you think, Ben? Or actually, I should say, I think she's going to finish her, with strikes, whether it's on the feet or on the mat. Because I could see, Verna conceding a little bit of guard play, hanging out on her back a little bit, taking some damage, running out of gas, and the fight ends.
Guys, I promise, me and Liam, we really don't talk fights outside of the show unless it's after the show. But this card, we seem to line up almost on every single fight, and we really think we see things the same way. Which last time that happened, we had a night. Now, Verna Jandiroba is not a bad fighter. I'm not trying to say that. But for me in this fight, when the jiu-jitsu cancels itself out, I think both ladies are phenomenal in the jiu-jitsu regard. I don't need to be the one to tell you. Go look at their accolades. But you go ahead and look at the striking. You look at the cardio. And it's a very massive advantage on the Mackenzie Dern side. She's going to be the much nastier striker here. She's been working with Parillo for a very long time. And striking has improved a lot. I'm not saying it's good by any means, but it's good compared to Jandiroba. Jandiroba doesn't really have much to offer on the feet. She seems kind of lost. Her head's on the center line for the most part and doesn't react well to shots. She just gets hit and almost as a Pez dispenser a lot of the time. And then you dig deeper into the Jandiroba record. And you just don't really see her go up against any grapplers. Her run is a little bit, I'm not going to say fabricated, but you look at the matchups and none of these girls, with exception to Lupita Godinez, who I would more classify as a dominant wrestler than anything, not a grappler. You have Yan Jiaonan, you have Amanda Lemos, you have Marina Rodriguez, you have Angela Hill, and then you get to Amanda Ribas. Maybe has a little bit of grappling with the judo tosses, but it really isn't all that good either.
I would say that I do think Ibas is a good grappler for whatever it's worth, but continue.
I think she just hasn't reliably gone to it as much as I want it to be.
100%, dude. Frustrating watch. As a fan, you're like, what? Why is she striking still?
Yeah, so I think that's the point I'm trying to get across here is that she has predominantly won her fights on merit being the better grappler by a wide margin. And she's just not going to get that here in this fight. She's facing some resistance where Mackenzie Dern isn't going to allow her to just take her down. And even if she does, she'll put her in danger there. She has the threat of reversing her or just stuffing it and keeping it on the feet. What if I tell you this fight's going to be a 5-round striking fest? That's what I think this fight's going to be. And I do think that Mackenzie has the opportunity of finishing Jandiroba. But the one thing is I think Jandiroba can tie up Dern when she does get hurt. The way I see a knockout happening is just cardio death, absolute cardio death from Verna, which after the 3rd round, we want to monitor. If it's still there, I would like to assume that Mackenzie Dern here will be able to get the knockout later on in the fight. I'm just going to bet KO 5. That's my take here.
I absolutely love it. Really quick, guys, I just wanted to point this out because I mentioned it before, but I actually have the facts to back it up. Dern had her best round in some ways in round 3 against Verna. She landed the big hammer fist that kind of clearly sold the round for her, right? But then if you look back, Verna lost round 1 and 3 unanimously against Esparza, lost round 1 and 3 unanimously against Dern, lost rounds 2 and 3 unanimously against Ebas, lost round 3 on 2 cards against Rodriguez, even in a fight where she won, right? So you just see Verna has a lot of evidence that 3rd round is where things start to go sideways for her. And now she's got to do 4 and 5 as well, potentially. That seems like a big ask. So for me, I'm going with Mackenzie Dern and New.
Shout out to my guy, Isaac, in the chat. My guy, you dug deep there. I appreciate that.
Absolute soldier hours. That's a really impressive ROI, my buddy. All right. That brings us, of course, to the main event of the evening, guys. Again, not going to bore you with it, but a super soft pitch. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, show love and support to my great guest, Wizz MMA. All his information down in the description box below, including the Bet MMA that Isaac was talking about. Both of us have third-party track records. You can find the bets that we've been on, 5 years ago, in many cases, right? So it's like we got a long track record. You could go through, see the highlights, the lowlights, and everything in between. God bless and good luck. Appreciate everybody for the support. Main event time. Let's do it. Heavyweight title. It's going down. It's going down between Tom Aspinall, a guy who's basically had, a career that was on this super hot trajectory, stalled out by the sport killer, John Jones. You know what I mean? Not Greg Jackson, right? Shout out to my old school MMA fans that know what I'm talking about. But basically, you look at John Jones and co., slowed down Tom Aspinall and grinded him out to a halt, my man. He's been sitting on the sidelines. He's been twiddling them thumbs, just waiting for something to do, right? And meanwhile, Ciryl Gane, on the sidelines himself, he was filming a movie. He went out there against Volkov, kind of laid an egg, but still got his hand raised at the end of the day. So now he gets this opportunity where it could be the make or break fight of his career, right? We know that Gane has great abilities in terms of his striking. He could fight for 25 minutes. He could be above average with his movement, with his athleticism for the heavyweight division. He's light on his feet. He gets in, he gets out. You watch him strike, there are times he looks beautiful, professional, the movement, everything looks on point. There are other times where you see him start to unload on somebody that he's already hurting, and everything that looks like technique goes out the window. He's throwing across his body. He's throwing forwards, backwards, elbows. You're like, what on earth is this guy doing, right? He loses the plot when he has somebody hurt. But he is one of these dynamic guys who's got an ability. I would say the thing I'm most afraid of for a guy like Gane is all right, what happens if he gets hit? Can he give it? Can he take it? It's yeah, he can give it. Can he take it back? It's yes. We did see against Tuivasa, in fairness. I bet Tuivasa and then some Gane finish props there, right? Because I was man, Tuivasa money line plus 4XX, how wrong could you be? And he went out there and landed the big shot. He had his best moment, and Gane was able to rally from that. I honestly think that moment broke Tuivasa as well, because he then looked like shit in every subsequent fight and didn't train very hard either. So you look at what happened to Gane against John Jones, and tough outcome, right? Really embarrassing. Frankly, I just don't believe that was a guy that got bested by jiu-jitsu skills, right? I just don't believe that. And your mileage may vary. You believe whatever you want to believe, right? But I just watch, and see the grip sequencing from John Jones, who is very, very dangerous, right? And I take nothing away from John. All you could do is try and choke somebody, right? If they tap early, it is what it is, right? You just take the dub and move on. But I just watched that from Gane, and it looked to me like a man who was mentally defeated, by a man who was defeated by the moment, a guy who let the weight of, oh, this is a big moment for me, fall in on him, right? And it is now something where you have to bring up the mental side of this, because it's happened to him twice. I'll remind you, the UFC was convinced Ciryl Gane was going to beat Francis Ngannou. They booked that fight fully believing Ciryl Gane is going to beat Francis Ngannou. They're like, Ngannou doesn't want this fight. Ngannou doesn't feel like doing this one. He knows that it's bad news for him. Ferdinand Lopez said it's bad news for him. All this stuff, right? And then what happened in the fight? It was Gane's own decision-making that cost him. Francis did a good job adjusting with the wrestling, doing everything like this, but Gane got on top in the 5th round, and he was the one that sat back for the heel hook. So now we've got evidence of Gane tapping to a move that, in my opinion, just was not quite there. And then we've also got him, self-sabotaging, falling out of a top position to sit back on it, right? Just a disaster. So I say all of that to say, I have real concerns about Gane. It's hard to make a bullish case for a guy like that in some ways, but then you just watch the rest of his body of work. We've all talked about how good Volkov is. And, Volkov, love it, hate it, whatever way you want to slice it, Gane is 2-0 against the guy, right? If you want to say conservatively, he's 1-1. If we say that last fight should have went to Volkov, which I think it should have, but they fought for 5 rounds back in the day, and Gane easily defeated him, right? Like, just made it look easy. Derek Lewis was so embarrassed by how bad he was getting whooped by Ciryl Gane, he just quit midway through the fight. He was like, fuck this. I don't need this shit in my life. Thanks anyways. Like, right off into the sunset, just basically called it, right? Like, I'm not doing this shit no more. And so when you look at Gane, he's got a consistency to his process where he can do it for 25 minutes. That's why I brought up that Volkov fight. That's why I brought up these fights where he's outlasting his opponent. Derek Lewis in Houston just decided, no mas, I don't need this shit no more. If you're seeing Tom Aspinall, a guy who's known for getting guys out of there early in the fight, get him down in the first round, take him out, go out there, put hands on him early, knock him out. That's a great way to win fights, right? But it's also the kind of thing where when it stops working, it can be like a real wake-up call, right? It could be really bad for you really fast, you know? And that is my only concern here for Tom Aspinall. I think that Tom Aspinall is the heavier-handed guy in terms of pure knockout power. I think that Tom Aspinall is the better wrestler here, and I think he's got the better jiu-jitsu. But I do worry about the athletic intangibles and about, you know, the fact there's a lot of pressure on Tom. Tom is a huge favorite coming in here. He's been off for a while, so he's got to come back off of a layoff, and he's got very little octagon time. So there's really not, for a guy that's had a bunch of fights in the UFC, he's had so little time in the cage. And Ciryl Gane, again, the opposite is true. He's gone 5 rounds multiple times in the UFC. He's gone the full 3 rounds multiple times in the UFC. That positions you to know what it's like to be out there. It gives you this time, this experience. Could I see Gane getting finished early? Absolutely. But I know, because I have evidence, that Gane can fight 15, 25 minutes. And I don't have the same for Aspinall. So when you're giving me plus 3XX on the one side, it feels to me like it's a plus 3XX or pass type of situation. Now, again, if you like the Aspinall side, total respect. I think it's Aspinall early props. I think it's Aspinall sub in terms of how I would see him getting it done, most likely. If I'm his coach, I'm telling him, what the fuck would we go out there and strike with this guy for? Let's take him down, put him on his ass, and make him make bad decisions. Because we know that you can make Gane make bad decisions off of the ground. But I will also just note, it seems to me like if Gane is able to defend some takedowns, keep this fight upright, fight him for 5 to 7 minutes, it could be a completely different fight. Most of the fights I've seen from Aspinall, even the fights where he wins, they're both touching, they're both landing, and then Aspinall hits him and they die, right? Or they're both touching, they're both landing, and then Aspinall goes for the takedown, gets the guy down, and finishes him. So I think that AW actually hits the nail on the head here. I think the gap on the ground is just too massive, and that's where I agree, right? I think when they're fresh in the early going, the gap on the ground is big. So my lean is towards Aspinall sub in the first 2 rounds. But I will just note, this is a live look on the Gane side, and for me, the pre-fight money line side is Ciryl Gane at this price. I did not think I would say that at the beginning of the week. I've criticized him many times for the grip sequencing against Jones and everything else, but it's a numbers game. I thought that Curtis Blades was the side, plus 3XX against Tom, and he died, right? So again, I'm acknowledging I could be wrong about this, but even looking back at that fight, Curtis has beaten Tom once before, right? They're 1-1 in their career series. It was an injury. You could call it a fluke. Even in that first fight that they had, Curtis was touching him in the early going. Low kick, put 2 hands on his chin, right? It's just like, I look at Tom and say, clearly extremely talented. Even more talented than Gane. But Gane is a 25-minute fighter, right? If you don't take him out of the fight, he's a 25-minute fighter. Tom Aspinall, I just don't know that. And I've seen him tap to Stuart Austin and that fake heel hook, right? I know it's a long time ago. You give him a pass, that's fine. I just look and say, if I have to be objective, plus 3XX in a title fight with a guy who's had title fight experience, fought the best guys in the history of the heavyweight division in many ways, has Ciryl Gane, like you look back at that resume and that body of work and the fact that no one thinks he's going to win, I think you have to at least be cognizant of that coming into this fight. And I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I do think these are 2 of the best athletes in the heavyweight division. as well as two of the better fighters in the division. So I think Aspinall is the more well-rounded fighter, but I think Ciryl Gane is the more proven fighter in some ways. As crazy as that sounds, just like what they can do for how long in different positions and all this stuff, I feel like we know a little bit more about Gane, and Aspinall is still a lot of questions. Maybe he's got all the right answers, right? Maybe he can do it all for 25, but we kind of just know it's hard to do everything all at once. Aspinall's a dynamic finisher, a more dynamic finisher than Gane, but Gane is a guy that can do it for 25. So let's find out. What do you think about this one, my man? It's going down in the heavyweight division. Who wins? How do they get it done? Is it England or is it France?
Now, I do agree with the sentiment that we really don't have much tape of Aspinall beyond round one and a half. So cardio is something that it's one of the few, if not one of the only things that we don't really know about Tom Aspinall. The cardio and then the toughness. But when you see this guy, not just, train and fight, see his performances, you see him on the mic and the guy is very confident. He's very smart with just the words he chooses, even when all the interviews were not painting him to be the antagonist in the Jones fight, but it was more so just asking him, oh, do you feel the pressure? Is the GOAT? And is this and that? He's like, do you think you'll be the GOAT if you beat John Jones? And the one answer I really liked was he mentioned, no, he's still the greatest of all time, but I'm just the better fighter now. And you don't really see a lot of fighters talk like that. I know it's a very basic point, but it shows some IQ there. And Tom has really shown in the cage too that the IQ matters, and it goes a long way because he takes fighters down that he's supposed to and ragdolls them on the mat. And then when he finds that he can land the big knockout punch like he did against Pavlovich, took advantage there too. All this to say, Ciryl Gane is one of the most high-level strikers in the division. He's one of the fastest strikers in the division. Doesn't really carry the power, but he does tend to throw volume. Does get discouraged when volume is thrown back at him, especially with power. And we saw that in the Ngannou fight. And his IQ, we will bubble this up, is the biggest negative to his game. I think in the cage, he finds his rhythm. He looks good for extended periods of time. And then he makes a couple of mistakes that prove to be too much to handle or too much to overcome in the fight. I think the striking, in terms of just who lands, I think Gane will be the fighter that lands a little bit more. But that's just going to open up holes for Aspinall to take him down that much more. He's not going to respect the power coming from Gane's end. And if Gane is pressuring him and if Gane is throwing a bunch of volume, it gives you the perfect opportunity to shoot for a double leg. And Aspinall is an ace on the mat. I think he's going to be able to win this fight via submission, round 2, round 3. That's my prediction. Unfortunate for Gane. I think that dude is a physical specimen, maybe the overall most athletic and most physically fit fighter in the heavyweight division that we've seen in, if not ever. But the skills don't, I'm not saying they don't match, but they're not at the elite level. I refuse to believe it. For me, I think it's Tom Aspinall inside the distance, submission 2-3.
There you have it. So my lean would be a little bit more sub 1-2. Yours a little bit more towards sub 2-3. I think he's going to be trying to time trial John Jones. If he's able to get the takedown, he's like, fuck, when did John get it? He's going to be trying to chase it down at just that one touch faster, right? And let's see if he's going to attack that arm lock like he did against Volkov, if he's going to maybe look to float to the back or something like that. But I don't know if he's going to go to that front headlock like John. John is quite particular with those and very dangerous. If you guys remember, my favorite and maybe the most violent choke in UFC history, he choked Lyoto Machida literally like a sack of potatoes. Guys, dropped him like a sack of potatoes. But I just look at this and I say to myself, fun scrap, interesting. Let's find out. Gane money line live if he survives the first 5 minutes. That's a consideration for me. But ultimately, I'm leaning towards Tom as the guy with more dynamic finishing threat early in the fight. So I do think he's a deserved favorite. It's just for me a question of numbers, right? In this heavyweight division, with a guy as skilled as Ciryl, with a guy who's got proven cardio, hard for me to get to this favorite. designation this big of a price in a matchup like this, but I'm fired up, guys. It's a good card. We got lots of fights going down. We have lots of opportunities, and Lord willing, we could turn a couple of those into successful bets. So peace, love, chicken grease to each and every one of you guys. Thank you all for showing love and support. 55 people still rocking with us live in the chat at 2:13 a.m. local time. Thank you all so much for the support. Your boy needs to go to sleep soon, but before I do, I'm going to kick it over to Wiz. And Wiz, please tell the people where they can find you, my brother.
My guy, first and foremost, great show as always. This is fun, and I think we line up almost every fight, which is whenever that happens, I love it. Now, you guys can find me everywhere at Wizz MMA. Instagram will be in the link for in the Twitter bio, so you can find that there if you want to follow the Instagram. I post a lot of training highlights, a bunch of just life stuff too, media. But yeah, man, I'm really excited for this card, and the fact that for me it's 7 a.m. I'm waking up right at 7 a.m. to watch the first fight.
I absolutely love it. Early card means early bird gets the worm. Going to be doing my due diligence tomorrow, guys. You can stay tuned if you're interested in my writing. I'm going to have my prelims going tomorrow. I'm going to have my main card up by Friday. Going to try and get it done a little bit earlier as well this week, just for the interest of that early card. But with that being said, all the information you need to find more from my brother Wiz, to find more from myself, it's all in the description box down below. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, drop a like on the video, come back next time, drop a comment. If you got questions, comments, or concerns, you can hit those all down in the box below. Thank you very much. God bless, good luck, and come back next time where we're having all the same fun again. Thanks, everybody.